Avatar, the Shadow of Kyoshi. This is the second book in this series that follows the young Avatar Kyoshi. Following directly after the first book in the series, The Rise of Kyoshi, this book follows Avatar Kyoshi as she struggles to fulfill her role as the Avatar for the world. This review will include spoilers for The Rise of Kyoshi, so if you haven't read the first book yet, I definitely recommend you check it out before watching this review. This review I will separate out into two sections, a non-spoiler section, followed by some light spoilers. This book follows directly after the events of the first book, with Yun having killed Jianzu and disappearing. Kyoshi wants to find Yun, but can't find him, and having to fulfill her duties as the Avatar, she is summoned to the Fire Nation after the Fire Lord requests her aid. Without delving into specifics of the aid that the Fire Lord is requesting, I will say that it leads to some pretty interesting politics that could end up devastating the Fire Nation if Kyoshi cannot help. The overall story is very different from the first book, but it still kept me hooked all the way through to the end. And unlike the first book, which suffered from some pacing issues, this book has very good pacing in my opinion. It is definitely a slower read than the first book, but it's not too slow by any means, and it builds throughout and leads to the climax at the end perfectly. Unlike the first book, where Kyoshi had her ragtag team of criminals, which was her Team Avatar, in this book it really is only Rangi and her for the most part. Although there are other characters such as Rangi's mother and Avatar Kuruk's farmer companion that play an important role in this story, this is more or less Kyoshi on her own. And I like this because it adds to the tension where she can't rely on so many other characters like she did in the first book. Other than Rangi, of course, which she relies on heavily in this book, Rangi very much has Kyoshi's back throughout this story. And one of my main complaints with the first book was the romance between Kyoshi and Rangi was kind of pointless in my opinion. It seemed like it was shoehorned into the book just so there was a romance aspect to it. Well, in this book, the romance plays a much more important role in the story overall. Another thing about this book is that I wish it was longer. I wish we got to learn more about the characters and more about the Fire Nation and what is going on there. And that is of course a huge compliment to the book, wishing that there was more to it than there is. Not to say that the book is short, mind you, I just wish there was more to it than there is. At the end of the book, Kyoshi and Yun are finally reunited, and without getting into any spoilers, I will say that the conclusion between these characters fits perfectly with the theme of this book. And all of that seems pretty good, right? Well, I mean, there are some aspects of this book that I didn't really like, but to talk about those I need to include some spoilers, but I will try to minimize the amount of spoilers I talk about. At the end of this book, you have a battle between Kyoshi and Yun, and without discussing the outcome of the fight, I just wonder, why didn't Kyoshi use the Avatar state earlier in the fight between her and Yun to win right away? It kinda seems like it was just an excuse to extend the fight out and make it more intense, but really, I thought that wasn't necessary at all. Another aspect of this book that I wasn't really a fan of was when Kyoshi swims down to the old ruins of the island charged with the spiritual energy and finally opens up a direct line of communication with Kuruk. The fact that she does this without thinking of a way out was pretty stupid in my opinion. And then the only reason she survives this is because the sailors disobey her orders and save her before she drowns. I thought that was kind of stupid. And a final aspect about this book I didn't really like was when Rangi's mother nearly dies, but Kyoshi saves her. So at this point in the story, we do know that Kyoshi is learning to heal using her waterbending abilities, but that she's still not very good at it. When Rangi's mother is dying from a stab wound right through the throat, Kyoshi is not able to heal her, so she has to take her to a healer that can, and she makes it before Rangi's mother dies. And this really didn't seem plausible to me. If the wound was maybe a little less serious, then maybe I could believe it, but a dagger through the neck where she's choking on her blood and it's gushing out, at least that's how the book described it, it really doesn't seem realistic that Rangi's mother would be able to survive that. But those are just a few of the negatives that I had from this book, and really it didn't hamper my enjoyment of the book at all. My favorite part of this book was probably when Kyoshi captured the people that were trying to overthrow the Fire Lord and take the throne, and Kyoshi is convinced that they are to blame for everything that's going on in the Fire Nation. And she is so consumed with this that she threatens to kill them, and really at this point in the book you believe that Kyoshi might actually go through with this. It is fascinating reading how far Kyoshi is willing to go to achieve her goals, and it really fits in with her character perfectly in my opinion. And then one other aspect I want to talk about from a spoiler perspective. So from the first book, we know that Kyoshi's parents deserted her, and I was kind of hoping after that first book we would get a good answer as to why they did that, perhaps in this book. Well, unfortunately in this book, we never do find the answer out for why Kyoshi's parents deserted her, and I really wish we got some closure on that front. Overall, I think this book was very good, and like I said with the first book, I think that it would make a great television series along with The Last Airbender and Korra. And like the first book, it definitely has its faults, but again, I think that mainly boils down to the fact that it's such a quick read. Since this is the last book in the Kyoshi series of books, the closure you get is much better than in the first book, but there are definitely still some loose ends that didn't get tied up, but nothing that you're gonna lose sleep over. So yeah, anyways, those are my thoughts on the Shadow of Kyoshi. Let me know if you have any comments down below. Thanks for watching.